So the time has come for the Zoe to be sold, and I'm selling it to my mum. Now the question is, would I buy another high mileage Renault Zoe? No. You probably remember quite a few months ago, I put a picture on social media of this on the back of a trailer. So there's a bit of a story behind this Zoe. It's now running perfectly, but if I was to go back in time, would I have paid what I paid for this Zoe? No. Let me tell you why. And to do that, let's pop back to Orkney. So it's happened. The Zoe's let me down. Completely lost power in neutral. Tried jumping it with a jump pack, and it works okay for about 200 metres and then stops again. So currently waiting on the AA to take me to my HEVRA garage. So by the miracle of editing, we're back on Orkney. Here is my motor and reduction gearbox unit out of my Renault Zoe. It failed at 114,000 miles. So thanks to my local HEVRA garage, I'm sorted. But let me show you why this unit failed. So basically, this is the bearing off the top of the motor, the original one that failed. As you can see, it's scored, and this failed. And because this bearing failed, it caused the motor shaft spindle to get bigger. So my garage had this turned down and a collar put on and a new bearing put on, but there was still a huge amount of movement in the bottom bearing of this motor. So what happened when the bearing failed? Well, what happened, as a lot of you noticed, is that the windings started to touch the motor just here. So you see all these marks here, you see it on the camera. That was actually rubbing against these windings and causing it to short. So the other end of the bearing fitted there. Now because the bearings had worn, that actual motor was dropped down. Obviously I'm exaggerating. And because it dropped down, it was shorting out on the windings just there. So what my garage did, they went to Renault. Renault will not sell you the bearing. So he got a replacement bearing from the United States. It was fairly quick to come over. And again, because this shaft had worn narrower, he got a local machine shop to basically machine it nice and flat, put a collar on it, then put the new bearing on it. But because the other bearing had gone as well, it was still shorting out here on the windings. So he was no further forward. So the thing with the ZE50 motor, as the EV Clinic have said, and it's a brilliant website and web page, and I'll put a link in the description below. Check them out on X as well. They're a research and development garage based in Croatia, and they've got a real short list of used EVs and what their thoughts are on them, because no EV is perfect, no car is perfect. At the end of the day, it's a mechanical thing that will wear out and break at some point during its life. It's just that the ZE50 motor, the bearings are wearing out. Okay, it's wearing out after 114,000 miles. The thing is, this is not a serviceable item. Renault will not sell you this bearing, and my garage tried to source them. So had to go to the United States to get the bearing. And you know, after 114,000 miles, that's pretty good going for a bearing when you think of all the torque that's going through the electric motor of the Zoe. Should be a serviceable item, it isn't, because hey, guess what? Renault want you to buy a complete motor, which I think is £7,000 or £8,000. Whereas obviously the price of the bearing is going to be a fraction of that. But anyway, little moan about Renault. You should make it easier. Now I can hear all you EV haters out there going, there you go, EVs, waste of time, you can't service them, you can't fix them. It's a little bit like the Ford EcoBoost engine and some of the Peugeot Citroën engines, the 1.5s. They have a wet cam belt system. Without going into too much detail, this new design wet cam belt, can't quite get my head around that, a rubber cam belt sloshing around engine oil. Eventually, little bits of rubber will come off the cam belt clog up the oil strainer, cause oil starvation to the rest of the engine, and it goes boom. Hence why in the trade, dealers call the Ford EcoBoost the Ford Eco Boom. All right. So even in 2024, the design of internal combustion engines, someone's not done their homework. They thought it'd be a good idea, it's not. Even with EVs, Renault thought it was a good idea, it's not. You need to make these serviceable items, because basically that's the only thing that's let down this whole motor assembly. So thanks to my garage, he basically sourced a 22 plate, 22,000 mile ZE50 motor and reduction gearbox unit, and just fitted the whole item into my Zoe and given it a change of the reduction oil in the reduction gearbox at the same time. So it drove fine, it drives fine, and as my garage has said, it'll be good for another 80, 90,000 miles. And with my mum doing around 2,500 miles a year, I think it's going to be fine. But I just thought you'd like to know, that's what happened to my Zoe when you saw pictures of it on the back of a transporter a few months ago. And thanks to the patience and long suffering of my garage and their research and development, they've found this issue. So they've got the heads up for anything else that comes in similar in the future. But yeah, would I buy another ZE50 with high miles? No. But anyway, let's go back to Leicestershire before I hand it over to my mum. So there we go, we're back from Orkney. As you can see, you know, basically the motor is made of chocolate. It's not really up to the job of doing over 100,000 miles. It's got a full Renault history with it. Conrad at my HEVRA garage did his best to replace the bearings, but then that commutative thingamajig was scored and worn. So the cheapest option was to put a used motor and reduction gearbox in this, and it is now honestly whisper quiet. And as my garage said, it's probably going to be good for another 100,000 miles. And my mum is doing around 2,500 miles a year. She's just going to be using it for local runs. So for that, it's absolutely spot on. She loves the car. So there you go, a bit of an update. Just a word of warning, don't buy high mileage ZE50 Renault Zoe. Battery's fine. Electronics still work. The onboard charge is fine. Just the motors are not up to high miles. Now if you want to watch the whole series on this Renault Zoe, click that playlist and you can see my whole process. I've had this just over a year. But other than that, thanks for watching. See you next time.